Hi everyone, good buddy Kaio here. I'm not really into the use of this. Sorry for the nervousness, I'm not really sure about how to go about this. I mean, it's sort of out of the blue, but I want to be at least put what happened out there for other Hetalia fans like myself. Guess I'll just talk, type, or whatever and just get through this. As much of an interesting experience this was, I'd rather not remember it and continue on with my derp life. Alright, so, this happened a while ago. Before school started that it went down. But I should probably go back even further to when it really first started. It was when Access Power's Hetalia was in full swing. Second season was still bounding through the fandom and giving out new glorious episodes every Monday. My older sister and I were both very involved in the series, which is a rare occurrence since she often didn't share interest with me. Oh well, I would force myself to get in whatever she was getting into so we can at least have a reason to hang out. But this was the first she came into my fandom without me looking for it. It was really nice, considering it was still unknown in our small town. It was even nicer to just have someone to relate to. Bootleg Hetalia DVD in question, she and I cosplayed it together. Watched episodes together, got merchandise together, you know, the whole kit caboodle. Though she was always able to get more stuff than I was because she actually had a job. At some point, she bought a bootleg DVD of Hetalia so she can watch it anytime. A picture of what I provided here, thanks to my mother lending her camera for a second before she had it sold the next week, of course. Of course, all the episodes just being ripped from the internet sites just had them subbed. I watched 1 or 2 episodes with her, but really, I was content with watching them online, so I left her to do it. About 2 or 3 days after she got the DVD, she acted really weird, is the best way I can describe it. In a drop of a hat, she dropped the whole Hetalia series, sending her aside with her merchandise and shelving her Hetalia cosplays, even selling some of them. When I tried to ask her about what was up, she just said she didn't want to talk about it, to the point she'd glare at me if I mentioned it to her. I was extremely disappointed at losing my sister when it came to the sibling bonding in the fandom. At the time, just figuring out she grew out of it, or something even better. That mindset especially fit in when she started to read Homestuck soon after to have to do something with it. Now here's where things got weirder. Now it's been a while since then, probably like about a month or so. I'm not sure why. Probably a phone call from my best friend. I got the urge to watch some episodes with just some classic good old Italy. Though currently the internet was being worked on with my father since he was changing phone providers on all that mess. So I decided to look for that Hetalia DVD my sister had. Took me a long while, but I found it shoved in the back of the DVD cabinet. Not sure why she shoved it back there. Well, at the time, the bootleg wasn't that bad, really. It had fan art of everyone as chibis around the world with the title on top. Same for the disc, just printed on the fan art. I popped the DVD in the player in my room and decided to look through the episodes to find a really fun one. Maybe the one when Romano is first introduced. As I went through the episode choice option I found something really weird in between episode 23 and 24. For those who don't know, it's the Liechtenstein and Switzerland episodes. Very cute indeed. And the 24th one has the conclusion of the Axis on the island arc thing. But there was another squared choice like an episode, but there really wasn't a title next to it saying what it was or what the number was, what the episode was about. Though it wasn't that it was untitled that caught my interest, but the screenshot of it, it was Italy smiling, looking upwards in a content daze. His eyes actually opened, mind you, with glistening eyes and what looked like sand. Perhaps he was laying on it? This blew my friggin' mind, for this was something new. I craved for new things in fandom, always. Perhaps this was a hidden chapter I wasn't aware of, or like a bonus episode. I bit my lip and trembled with excitement, and I knew that I had this all to myself. Wait until my friends here heard about this. I was going to be more knowledgeable than anyone else, of course. When I look back, I wish I would have had found it. Without much ado, I clicked the select button on my remote to watch it. The title animation appeared as always, large orchestra blaring out for a few seconds to show the Japanese katakana of Hetalia with Axis powers next to it. Soon after, it shifted to the view of the island that the Axis were stranded on. Japan and Germany sitting against the shade of the tree, while Italy just laid in the sand, soaking up the sun with all that cute, dumb look on his face. Now, before I go on, I read stories like this before about lost episodes of cartoons, stories about I didn't believe until now, honestly, and I know how they went off about it being in extremely bad quality, but this actually wasn't too bad. Sure, it wasn't the best quality, it was still quite pixelated from being ripped off of a site, then burned into a disc, but it was okay. The sound was just a tad muffled, nothing too out of the ordinary. Of course, this just kind of made it creepier later on, but when it was able to be seen better, but I'll get into that in a bit. Back to the episode, while Italy was sunbathing in his jacket and shorts, the camera cut over to Germany and Japan, though they both looked a tad upset, if not a bit worried, and then they started to speak. Two things threw me off. One, there was no subtitles. I had zero ideas on what they were talking about, and two, their voices were actually those who voiced them in the series. I was extremely impressed with such raw footage, though I was a bit miffed that there was no subs. Oh well, as long as Hiroki Yasumoto, Germany's Myuu, kept talking, I was happy all the way. The two seemed to be chatting about something serious. Germany was clutching his stomach from time to time in pain as Japan would nod and set a hand on the stomach as well. My guess is that they were run out of steady food on the item, so they were starving. That was kind of a downer to start the episode on. But it was only the beginning. There was probably a fun way to get food later on. Just then, Italy had called out, having the two of them looked up to where he was, which was now currently running out in the ocean. He waved to them, and the two of them waved back unenthusiastically before the other went back to just playing the sun and water. I didn't notice this until then, but the only thing playing the background was this of the ocean's waves. Something not uncommon, but it's certain that kept the atmosphere kind of stoic, especially when the focus was to the hungry and worried nations in the shade. But either way, I was too sucked up in the beautiful new material, I didn't question it. I didn't even care that I didn't even know the bulk of it, but I mostly cared for the actions anyway. The nations were quiet for a while, before Japan seemed to ask something, and Germany looked to him in shock, almost exclaiming before being quietly hushed by the island nation, making him whisper the line instead. Ooh, what was Japan thinking, I thought. But Japan had repeated the Japanese statement in more quieter and clearer tone. Not taking his eyes off Italy in the water, for a few moments the two of them discussed the issue. Obviously talking about the Italian, though soon enough the two of them nodded in agreement. At that moment, even though it was just for a few seconds, Germany had made the saddest face I've ever seen. Like, he could burst out to tears at any moment, but he kept it back. I inwardly flipped my shirt. Shit is such emotion, even if it was short, though it made me wonder even more that what brought it on. The scene changed to nighttime. The three nations huddled around the fire for warmth, though they seemed at least content with their jackets on. As usual, Italy was fast asleep next to it, sleeping constantly while leaving the other two nations to their thoughts. Still, the only sound of the oceans crashing against shore was heard in the background as the two were silent. Though soon enough the camera panned over them, giving each other a subtle nod. And in unison, the two stood up, going over to Italy and picking him up very carefully, not wanting to wake him up. At this point I was extremely confused what they were planning to do with him. Were they going to the new location? Quietly, they shoved the sleeping nation over the ocean and carefully set him face down. Japan setting his hands over these others' heads so to keep it still below the water surface. It didn't take long until Italy began to thrash around, bubbles popping fiercely on the water next to his head, only having Japan press down harder while Germany was looking away with his eyes closed and lip being bitten onto hard. While this was going on, my mouth was hanging ajar. Japan and Germany were drowning Italy? Why? As I watched this insanity, I recognized the word Gamananasi Hetalia, come from Japan. Sorry, Italy, what the hell? About 15 seconds, which felt like almost forever of watching the poor nation, Italy's limbs fell with a plop of water in the water, with the bubbles ceasing to rise anymore. The deed was done, but why? Japan and Germany picked up the waterlogged Italy and brought him back to the shore, placing him down to the next to the fire while Germany sat aside, just staring at the fire, as contemplating what they just did. Japan unsheathed his short sword and kneeled down next to the corpse, taking off his own jacket and setting it aside. With one more look to the blonde before back down, Japan took a deep breath before making an incision from the base of his neck all the way down to his belly button, cutting it in a bit more so he can be able to flip the skin back to reveal the bloody organs of the once living nation. At this, I had to pause the episode, feeling quite lightheaded at this. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, I read it and looked at gory Hetalia stuff, but seeing it down in Studio Dean style and done in official voices, or if it's fake, a really good artist or a very good sound-alikes, it was just way too surreal for me. And while I had the TV paused, I had a good chance to look at Italy's insides. God, that sounds so weird as I typed this. And they just looked so real. Not that they were hypercammed, but as if the artist had stared at the inside anatomy of a person for hours, drawing every little curve to make it realistic. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to turn it off and abandon that TV with a DVD inside, but I was already too far in it. I had to see this through to the end. It would haunt me for the rest of my life if I stopped there. After taking a short breather and drinking some water, I pressed play on my remote to resume the madness. Instantly, I was greeted by a slurp sound of Japan sliding his hand into Italy's body and pulling out one of the organs out of place. It looking like the liver, with it so detailed with it not to mistake the organ. Japan sighed as he cut off the connecting strand with his sword and set the mess of the organ onto the discarded jacket before going back in and setting aside the kidney. Both of them. While Japan searched around, Germany reached over to some sharpened sticks as he seemed to have gathered earlier and penetrated the sharp end through each organ that Japan had laid out. The saddened side, he set the organ kebabs on a range that on the fire so it could get cooked, which I didn't know how that was even possible. Once more, after a seemingly long period of time, Germany pulled the now cooked liver from the fire while handing Japan, who accepted it with his arm still smeared a kidney. Both of them were in silence before Japan murmured, "Itadakimasu," and took a large bite from it. It still makes me feel weird whenever I think about seeing that scene, but the lightheadedness faded as I heard something that made me gasp. "Do it so, Nihon!" Both of them turned in shock, the camera panning over to Italy was awake. What? How was he awake? They drowned him! Or how was he just unconscious? Hell, I wasn't even sure what was going on, and it seemed like that the other two had no idea either. Germany and Japan tried to explain themselves, but Italy began to grow more panicked, slowly getting what was happening, and he began to scream in pain, fear, and sadness. I couldn't pinpoint what emotion was there, but it was so weird to hear him like that. It almost sounded like the man voicing him was in a large amount of pain himself. Germany and Japan went over him, trying to get him to be quiet. Though after a large confusion of everyone yelling at once, Germany was the one to finally scream for everyone to be quiet, shaking Italy to try to make him quiet, resulting just tugging the curl to make him stop momentarily. At this point, when I should have laughed, I practically pointed to tears. Germany talked, trying to appear strong and try to explain their situation. My guess of situation was there was no food left, so they were going to eat Italy's, since he was the weakest. Though he was a nation, right? They were all nations. Why did they have to resort to that? Why was it why Italy woke up? Soon enough, Italy gave an understanding nod, whimpering in pain as he fears as well. He sputtered out something, pausing at the point to cough, blood drooling down his chin. Now it was Japan's turn to talk, seeming to try to comfort him in a soothing tone. After his small speech, Italy nodded once more before looking down, seeing that Germany was gripping his hand tightly, with another nod from the German and Japanese nation. Japan went back over and scooped his hand into now what's somewhat functioning body, pulling and cutting out his spleen and setting it aside. Italy almost screamed, reduced to a sort of mixture of whimpering and sobbing. The camera cut to a view of his and Germany's hand becoming more constricted against each other. The shot panned to the frowning Germany, who once glanced at Japan's work before speaking again, calling it Italy's attention. He spoke for a bit, trying to smile, and soon Italy smiled back at him, for once in the series, actually opening his eyes to reveal their golden honey color, and called him the familiar word he used to call him, Captain. Then there was a time skip, and soon a large portion of the organs was lying on Italy's jacket. Things I could recognize being intestines, pancreas, bladder, practically everything but the brain, lungs, and heart. Japan wiped an an arm to his forehead, smearing it with blood accidentally before impaling them on sticks and sticking near the fire. He turned back to Germany, who was still holding Italy's hands. He crawled over to get a closer look, and Italy had seemed to pass on again, his eyes slightly glistening and staring blankly upwards with a small smile on his face. This shot was the one that showed in the menu. Japan looked up to Germany, seeing that he was still frowning with blue eyes glistening with tears as he still tried to get over having this happen to him. Japan set a hand on his shoulder, murmuring something seemingly comforting, making Germany nod in agreement and sigh shakily. Japan frowned lightly at this moment as he moved aside, grabbing the dead Italian's free hand and squeezing it tightly, saying something to Germany before looking to the fire where the organs were roasting. Germany glanced back to the fire for a moment before he looked up to the sky, where Italy was staring. The camera panning upwards to it, past the stars and everything until it was completely black. And then the next episode started playing, just like that, no credits or anything, just left the episode on a cryptic or omnistic note. I have no idea. I wish I could have it run on my computer to get screenshots, but the disc refused to play it on there for some reason. And I don't really have a good camera to snap a clear picture. My friend Fia was kind enough to get 2 screenshots for me, though the disc was only worked on her computer for so long, but I'd rather to not look at it again. It may not sound as bad as when you read this, but that made me get away from Hetalia for a while, honestly. Though I am not as weak stomach as my sister, I still love the series and will continue to love it. But since then, I refuse to watch any anime episodes, but would prefer to see fan-made gore over the official ones anytime. Damn, I never knew this creepypasta, in which I once think on the Creepypasta wiki back before it was deleted, was actually this good. It felt like an Edgar Allan Poe story that I was reading. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, this story was one of my favorite Lost Episode creepypastas I've ever read. Along with Lost Episodes Can Be Found Again and the Sonic the Hedgehog episode 66. This story was really amazing. Now, I have read this story in the past. I think back in 2022. Yeah, the editing in that video wasn't that good, so I decided to rebrand it. But anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I loved every single detail and absolute horror in this creepypasta. Like, it was absolutely disturbing and it was absolutely disgusting. I just loved it. Are there any negatives on the story? Surprisingly, no. This story was just perfect. It was cooked, and it was surprisingly great. The story was probably one of my favorite Lost Episode creepypastas. The grammar was good too, and I'll give the credit to the author to that. My final little rating of this story would definitely be a 10 out of 10. It was that good. Anyway, this is just my opinion. If you disagree with it, that's fine. Anyway, I'm out.